Hey everyone, it's Helen from S&B Deal Hunter. Today we have Walker Yarbrough with us, an acquisition entrepreneur who previously worked in investment banking and at a healthcare startup and acquired a vending machine business. Walker is also one of our recent M&A advisors at S&B Deal Hunter. He just joined the team, and that's what makes this podcast very special as well. So really looking forward to hearing Walker's story and learning more about his acquisition journey. So, Walker, it's great to have you on today.
Awesome, Helen. Yeah, super excited to be here. I've really enjoyed, working with the team and getting to know everyone. So, really excited to dive in.
Well, Walker, let's first talk about your background a little bit. What were you doing before, maybe after college? What were you doing before deciding to go down this sort of acquisition entrepreneurship path?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. So, I went to the University of Georgia initially and did have, kind of a more traditional finance background. So I majored in finance and management information systems there, knowing I eventually wanted to do something entrepreneurial and thought investment banking would be a good start for that. So moved to Manhattan right after college, so not too far from where you are up there,
Yep.
and started working in the city in investment banking in the healthcare group, and really enjoyed it and thought I was getting a great experience, but kind of knew ultimately that I'd want to do something more entrepreneurial, and knew when I was in that position there, I could see people who'd been there longer and were my bosses and superiors there, and even once they'd climbed the ladder, they were still just didn't have a lot of control of their own time. They were doing great by a lot of standards, but just in the office super late and working on weekends and traveling all the time, and it was just a future I didn't see for myself, I guess.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And tell us about what you kind of pivoted to afterwards.
Yeah, so I knew I was like, all right, I either want to start a business or the idea of buying a business was kind of in my mind, because that's basically what we would do in investment banking, is help other businesses buy businesses or raise capital or spend capital, and kind of decide the best path for that. um, so it was a little bit in my mind, but I knew, or I thought, I was like, I need to figure out how to run a business first. So it was like, next step should be a startup. Um, so I went to a healthcare startup, and around the Series A, we were kind of going into the Series B. So that's around the time frame of the business. It was still on the smaller side, and I was one of the early finance hires. I guess there was two finance people there already, so got in on the finance side, where it was more strategy and things like that, and figured I'd learn a little bit more of kind of like the 1 to 10 side of the business. So after they kind of have a base, but haven't really scaled a ton yet. Now they're actually, I think, the biggest employer of psychiatrists. So they've grown a lot since
That's
then.
crazy.
Um, which so that was definitely cool to see. But even then, so I was there from Series A through Series C, and was still living in Manhattan at the time. And then after the Series C, just didn't really like the way my job had changed a little bit, kind of more focused on the P&L, like started offshoring positions and figuring out how to cut costs and drive towards profitability, because we were still, in the startup phase of growing revenue and focusing on that. And then after the Series C, had to focus on more on the bottom line, as those things go. And so was really wanting to quit. And this is when I was looking at buying a business. So I was kind of doing it at the same time. So working and then living in New York and looking, in my free time, at buying businesses.
Tell us about maybe some of the deals you started looking at earlier on. Did you kind of go in with a strong thesis in mind? Where were you looking? You were in New York at the time. Were you also leveraging this as an opportunity to move? Or tell us more about that.
Yeah, of course. So I was definitely thinking I would not want to buy it in New York. I was like, I just thought it'd be difficult to buy up there, and I knew long term I didn't want to stay there. I figured I'd want to come back to the South at some point, so I was really more looking in the South, and I was still kind of, you know, just trying to think of different ways to get more passive income. That seems like where everyone's head goes. Like, how can I make passive income? So went through a lot of different ideas there. Some of them were pretty bad.
Tell us about some of the bad ones.
Okay, yeah, the worst thing I got roped into, and this is gonna make me sound dumb, and it was dumb, but was like, have you heard of Amazon automation stores?
Yes, I think so. The ones where basically you like work with someone that has like a bunch of inventory and they're like arbitraging on prices. Is that right?
Yeah, so basically that's what it is, and it was a sales pitch that I got sold on. They're like, you know, had me talk to a couple people they'd built stores for. So it's basically a person who would like build you an Amazon store. Oh, why do you need me in the Amazon store? Oh, because you'll, supply some of the capital to buy the inventory up front. And each person can only have one Amazon store, so it has to be like in your name. And I was just eager and ready to get passive income going. So I was like, oh man, that sounds great. I'll keep my job and have like an Amazon store. And so it started off and it was, an upfront investment. And I think I spent probably 35,000 on like an Amazon store to get built.
Wow.
And
How'd
then
that go?
so it started off okay, actually.
Oh, really?
Like,
Okay.
yeah, there was a month there where, maybe for a little bit we were doing like I had days where we did over 1,000 in sales, and I wasn't really having to do anything. So I'd just check in and be like, "Oh, sweet, we sold, a lot of." I remember we were selling a lot of Calvin Klein cologne at one point, and that quickly came to an end because the store got banned by Amazon. Apparently, they were like breaking some of the rules.
That's
So,
pretty crazy. So you were looking at all these other ways to kind of like make money online, if you will, or just make passive income that
yep.
are out there, not just buying a business.
Oh yeah, I mean, I looked at a lot of different ways first because that just they seemed way more achievable almost. At first, I was like, all right, well, let me look at these things. I started a little bit of like a t-shirt or apparel business at one point that was like print on demand, and that never really went anywhere either because you're just trying different things. What's
Yeah.
gonna stick? Because my girlfriend she had made an Etsy shop that was doing really well selling different things. So it's like, oh, something like that. Like I could do a t-shirt shop, but there's a lot of people in that space. So pretty competitive. Yeah. So you could
Yeah.
say I looked at a lot of different things and it was trading options. That's probably the best thing that actually kind of works sometimes. But
Yeah,
so,
and tell us about that. I love that you tried all these things out. I think people don't talk about this enough, but actually a lot of people who end up buying businesses tried all these other ways to make money first that, they see online. So, yeah,
yeah, exactly.
what was trading options like?
I mean, that was sometimes good, sometimes bad. It was like the market had been in a pretty I mean, it's been pretty good really since COVID, besides a little bit in 2022. So, I mean, that didn't go terribly, but it wasn't like a real, I guess, consistent source of income or passive source and anything like that. You need to have a decent amount of like money in there to be making, unless you're doing super risky things. But I was more selling them instead of buying them. But so I guess yeah, long story short was looking at every possible way to kind of build some sort of passive income or do something entrepreneurial, while kind of keeping my job and doing things simultaneously there. That was, I
Yeah,
think, the
what
biggest jump off point is like, being okay with quitting corporate America because I guess all my family and friends, no one in my family ever really owned businesses or had gone the entrepreneurial route. So it wasn't as much in my, you know, directly in like, oh, this is what I need to do. Although, now I think it's gotten more and more popular.
Sure. And at what point were you like, I'm gonna go down the business buying route? You tried all these different things and these different, ways to make money. None of them really hit. Now what point were you like, oh, I'm gonna go buy a business?
Yeah, so I think what initially opened up my eyes there, and this is probably the same for a lot of eventual acquisition entrepreneurs, is I liked or I try to read a good bit of books there too. And I read Buy Then Build, the Walker Dybel book. So I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of your guests have a similar story, and and I think that really just lays it out in a very simple manner and like it looks pretty achievable then, right? It's like, all right, these are kind of the steps. Look for a business, buy it there. And I was used to multiples I'd seen in banking and things, and these 3x multiples were, that's a bargain compared to any of the large publicly traded companies.
And so where did you kind of start? Like when did you go from just reading and educating yourself to actually taking action?
Yeah, so then I started looking at different businesses on, Biz by Sell and any other different business website. Um, there's a lot of noise out there and a lot of not super great businesses listed too. So I think that was kind of the key, is sifting through some of that and figuring it out. And you learn as you go, looking at different sims, reading through the different businesses. And I'd gotten actually kind of close on one that was a sports betting analytics website. I was
Okay,
like, that's got to be exciting. Because I really was thinking, something I like, and I was like, that'd be a cool business. That was tricky for a couple reasons. I mean, the SBA doesn't like gambling,
sure.
and if your business derives, I think, more than a third of its revenue from gambling, then it's not SBA financeable. And this one didn't even derive the revenue directly from gambling. It was more providing the analytics for people to make their own decisions. So it was like a membership to it. Um, and jumping into it, looking through diligence, I was trying to get a full understanding, because basically, if I still, the same premise I have today is like, if I own a business, I want to be able to understand exactly what's going on and how it works. Like if someone's out sick, or this person can't come in, or everyone quits, I want to know how, the gravy's made, basically.
Yeah,
And I didn't have a huge background in technology, and just looking through all the algorithms and the data, I was like, this is going to take me a long time to fully understand kind of what makes this work, I guess.
yeah.
And if something breaks, I don't think I'm going to be able to fix it, at least not right away. Um, so that completely revised my thesis from being something I'm just like interested in, to I'm kind of more now focused on the numbers of the business. And just after that, wanted something simple. I was like, all right, I want a business that I can easily understand how it works. It doesn't have to be like an easy business necessarily, but just something that's simple. And so that was my new thesis, something I could, be able to understand how exactly their business model and how it works, and in a day or less.
And was the goal here at this point that you're trying to replace your income? You're trying to, go full time into this, or was it still like this passive income on the side type of situation, like with the other things you had tried?
Yeah, so it had gone back and forth a little bit, and initially it was something I was going to go fully into, and then as I got a little bit further down the path and was just really looking to get out of my initial job, kind of, and have a little bit more freedom and leave New York City. I picked up some different like consulting work and things like that, and so then I decided, oh, I kind of like doing this ad hoc work, and it's kind of on like buy side, sell side engagements, and just sort of um, off on my own. So I was like, okay, if I could get something supplementary to this, then I'd be happy and just be able to leave my job to focus on things more. So that's kind of when my thesis switched a little bit to have like something more passive. I was open a little bit to like if I had to jump fully into it, but I was also getting excited about some of like the opportunities and like consulting and being able to work with a lot of different people or on different deals. Cause I realized, and I think we talked about this at one point too, Helen. I was like, maybe I like doing deals more so than operating sometimes.
Yeah.
Like that can be a little bit different too. So it's like, maybe if I can just get something that like is a nice steady source of income that can at least cover my expenses and stuff, and then I can go continue to do these things and opportunistically look, or just control my time a little bit more. So to devote more time for either looking for a business, if that's what I'm looking to do, or any number of hobbies, I guess.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like there are a lot of people who prefer the deal making side more than the actual operating. But I'm curious, at what point did you, come across the vending machine business you ultimately acquired? What did that look like? And what were some of the things that initially jumped out at you?
Yeah, certainly. So then I had gone fully remote, I guess, with my job at this time, um, and left New York City, kind of moved back to the Atlanta area, and was just going to be doing living in Airbnbs because I wanted to travel around for a little bit. I came to that realization too when my girlfriend and I we were in New York. We were like, for the same price as New York City living, we could, be out skiing or something like that, get a different place somewhere else and
Yeah,
just move around. So, I was back in the Atlanta area when I found that business, and this is where it was. And both her family and my family and all of our friends and a lot of our friends are from the Atlanta area. So it's like that would be great to get something here as kind of like a home base to just come back to, if anything goes wrong. Like I have friends and family and my mom and dad around, and like they can help me out with certain things, and I give them a call, and there's always a place to stay. So like a good
sure.
reason to get back, I guess, opposed to just a business in a random area that I didn't have any ties to. So I think that was the initial thing that stuck out to me. Um, and then I also just thought vending was like, all right, that's a pretty simple business. You're just, you know, selling people food and drinks, and it's way more convenient for them than if they have to leave their space. And so I went and met the guy who was selling the business, and it was actually a more competitive process than I kind of expected. Like there was other interested parties in it and everything too. And I think that was something I learned pretty early on is like the space is getting way more hot now. Like everyone
Absolutely.
is wanting to buy a business. I feel like that's kind of like in vogue a little bit now, largely thanks to you and some of the other, people who have been um, touting all the upsides of it.
And tell us, how did you actually end up ultimately, getting it under LOI with all the competition?
Yeah. So I met the guy, and this is where I went against, I think, a lot of traditional advice of like, don't buy a job because the business was owned by 75-year-old Jamaican man, and he had immigrated to the US and set up the business and gotten all of his accounts and everything like that. And him and his wife were fully operating the business, and they were
Wow.
selling it too. So it wasn't like they had any employees, but they were just working way too much for they wanted to retire, take a step back. So it was the right reason for selling. It was like, all right, this guy clearly, he wants to retire. We're happy to sign non compete. He's not going to be back out there trying to take customers or anything like that. And a great seller who was really happy to help, but he was very, concerned I didn't have any vending experience and it was only one guy and stuff like that. So I had to, go out there and meet him and talk to him about, looking to work hard and different things I'd want to change in the business. And I did change a good bit of things initially because I guess when sent him the LOI, and then the other main competitor was, I think, an established vending company,
Ah,
and the difference maker was that they wanted him to stay on longer.
interesting.
I think he honestly would have rather gone with them initially because I didn't have experience in the industry and they did, but they wanted him to stick around for it was either like 6 months or a year or something and keep kind of operating that route.
And he was like, I'm out. And
Yeah.
what did you negotiate? Like, how did you end up structuring the deal with him?
Yeah. So it was probably a bit of a rookie mistake here. I did not get any seller financing, which I definitely should have. But like, luckily, super trustworthy guy, and held up his end of the bargain the whole way. Um, so it didn't even end up needing the seller financing because a lot of times, that's just to keep the seller have some skin in the game, make sure they don't run off on vacation day one
Right.
and never call you back or help you with anything. I still talk to him sometimes if anything goes wrong, and he keeps a close relationship still with a lot of the different locations. Like he has liked to pop in sometimes just because he was the one out there servicing the machine, so he became friends with a lot of the people that work there. So it is still good to have him kind of plugged in because I'm definitely not as good about that. He was huge on the relationship side, which is a big part of the vending, I'd say. So when we did the deal, um, there's a program called NIAX, and that it's actually, it's double-edged sword. It's great, but kind of annoying too. So it's an app I actually have on my phone, and it's kind of like the operating system for all the vending machines. So I can look through on my phone and see if like a machine's down. I can see what inventory's in there and what's not, which really makes like um you be able to take a step back from the actual operations and you can manage it kind of from that.
It's like the Shopify for vending machine businesses.
Exactly. Exactly. The annoying part is they take 6% off the top in transaction fees.
Wow.
So that takes a dent right away. Um, but so when we were trying to finalize the sale and like work through it in the transition, I think he actually owed them some money for a part or something. And I found this out later because it just kept getting delayed. Because basically, what they had to do, I set up an IX account and then they were going to have to transfer all of the machines into my account. And so that then the money would start flowing to mine and like the management and things like that. And that was the last piece for like a month. Um, and so I had to keep calling, hey, what's going on? He's like, oh, they're just taking their time. And then I realized he owed him like a part or something for like $200. Nothing big. And
But he didn't
that,
want to pay it.
yeah, I guess not. And it delayed it because that was like supposed to close in November. And this had, and the wrinkle in the story is I had already rented a place in Utah for like January, February, March in Airbnb since I was jumping around. So I really wanted to be around in the Atlanta area for the deal structure. And this is where I probably, would never recommend anyone to do this, but it got delayed actually and didn't close until, oh gosh, right before like Christmas. So like January 20 or December 23rd or something. And I think the place I'd rented in Utah started like January 2nd. And so we closed on the 23rd. And luckily I'd already hired an operator. So that was
Okay.
kind of part of the structure too. But he was wanting to start working in November because that's when it was initially supposed to close. So like he was getting like, hey, I need to work because he'd already left his other job and things like that. So it basically worked out where, and it luckily was more seamless, but he kind of came in and I did, and we all went out on training for just a few days, but I was only around for like 5 days after close, which is bad. I know it's bad. And he luckily though kind of jumped in and was great off the bat and like really helped take over that operating role. And I wouldn't really recommend people go that route. You really should get in and work in the business for a little bit first, which was my plan initially, but everything just kept getting delayed.
That's wild. You jump in for 5 days and you go to Utah. Um, that's wild. Tell us about hiring him the operator, because I think a lot of people, want that, but
Mhm.
they don't do it during sort of the diligence process pre-close. Tell us how you approached it, where you found this person, what was their background, um, and how are you incentivizing them now? Because they're effectively running the day to day, right?
Yes, definitely. And that was probably one of the key stressors during the situation. Um, but I was fortunate enough actually to have stayed in touch with some of my friends from high school who were still around the area. And it was one of my friends who had actually started working as an electrician, but then wasn't loving that job as much anymore. And I just, contacted some of my buddies. I was like, hey, do you guys know anyone who would be interested in like, helping me out and operating this business? And he was referred to me as a friend. He was like, oh, he actually just left this job. Like, so he might be interested. And he has like a handyman experience, which can be helpful just in case anything goes down or goes wrong. So it was through a personal network that I found him. Um, which was helpful. But fast forward a little bit, actually probably 3 months later, he only stayed with us for about the first 3 months.
Wow.
And, he had talked about like during that 1 month gap, he had started getting, uh, talking to a dentist office too, or something about going to work there. And so that had thrown a little bit of a wrinkle in it. But he also knew I was gone for 3 months. And then I was freed up a little bit after that. So he's like, hey, sorry, after these 3 months, I gotta go. So luckily I was able to then post the role I posted it on Craigslist and Indeed. And I wasn't all that hopeful. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be bad. I'm gonna have to go back and like operate this myself, which wasn't my intention. And within probably 3 days while I was out there, we got over 100 applications.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, maybe it's not as hard to hire into these positions as I thought.
And what was the job description? What was the role of this person? And what was your role? Because you weren't in the day to day. What were you looking for ideally in this operator?
Yeah, so good question. And like they have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, but their day-to-day operations is really driving the route and going and filling up the machines, maintaining customer relationships, talking to them, letting us know the way it was set up is they would let us know, excuse me, any items that were low. So like they would go out, fill up the machines, and then say, hey, we're out of, these things, or we're on. All right, let me back up a little bit. There's some of the nitty gritty in the like warehousing or inventory. So initially, when I bought the business, there wasn't any sort of structure to any of that, and that's kind of where I was able to add some value initially, and that was more my role in the beginning. So, for instance, there was no tracking of what was being sold or anything like that, but there was data in that NIAX app and the MoMA app. So I was able then to look at all of the items that were being sold. Some of them were even being sold for less than what they were costing the previous owner. There, there was a cheeseburger. These machines have like fresh items in them in some of the locations. So there was a cheeseburger. I remember seeing that he was selling for like 250 and it cost him $3 to
That's
buy. I was like,
wild.
yeah. So not a lot of cost control and things on that side. So I was able to like add some structure to the inventory and then start stocking. And another thing he would do is whenever they were out of something, he would basically just go to like there's two main places to get the items. One being Sam's Club, which is still the best prices for anything, even the more scale you get. For instance, I saw a vending business I was actually going over with a member that was for sale in Texas, and we were going over it last week or 2 weeks ago, and he put in what seemed like a fairly genuine offer, and they had gotten an offer already for $12 million.
Wild.
And so huge business. And I was looking through their info with them, and they were actually still getting over half of their items from Sam's Club.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so that
pretty wow, that's pretty good. And were you sourcing from Sam's Club too? Did you continue that or
yeah. So I had been sourcing from Sam's Club as well. But that guy was sourcing some from Sam's Club, some from Walmart, some from this other place that or two other places that were more expensive. So I was basically cutting items that didn't meet the profitability threshold, essentially, which for me was like every item had to make at least be like 100% marked up, which sounds like a lot, but that's kind of like then you have a gross profit of 50%. So
yep.
just like regulating some of those things and changing that and tracking inventory. And if things aren't selling well, we get rid of it and try a new item. So just systematizing that a little bit and systematizing orders to where they get shipped to us instead of going to Sam's Club and things
I
like
was I was
that.
gonna ask, was your operator like walking into Sam's Club, like checking out?
Well, luckily not, but that's what the previous seller was doing. He would
Okay.
like run out of Coke and then, go by Sam's Club to get
That's
more
funny.
Coke type thing. So definitely some efficiencies to be had there. So then we were able to like, set it up and I could say, all right, we sell, you know, 280 honey buns a month. We want to have that many honey buns in stock so that like in storage. And then we'll just order those kind of at the same level each month, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and did you guys when you bought the business, was there already a warehouse? Did you have to go find one? Like what was the previous owner doing?
So he basically just had a moving warehouse um, and operates out of a box truck. So that's kind of like his moving warehouse, but he would go restock everything like probably most days because would, have his 4 cases of Coke in there, fill up the machines that day with those 4 cases, then go back that night to buy 4 more
Very
cases
light
for the
on
next
working
day.
capital.
Oh, oh yeah, which is why I love the business. Yeah, light on working capital. So
What
no,
did you guys do?
we then got storage space and like fill things in there. So adding some more cost there, but also we're saving just by kind of our product mix optimization.
And how many locations did you guys, when you bought the business, how many locations were you in? Where were these vending machines located, and what did you kind of learn about sort of those relationships? Any sort of I don't know, things that you didn't expect?
Hmm. So they were in only 7 locations. So basically, some customer concentration inherent right there.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't expect for people to be as passionate about their, vending items as they were. Like, sometimes if you cut a product and that was someone's favorite product and they're like, "Oh, what's going on?" And people would get kind of fired up on things like that. And they were in 7 different locations, but like manufacturing and warehousing facilities. So these are
Mm.
places where the workers are, they may be running, a lot of the locations are running 3 shifts starting at, 5 a.m. And then they've got their first, second, third shift. Their third shift ends at 10 p.m. and they're running, 6 days a week and things like that. And people get 15 minutes for lunch. The closest restaurants 10 minutes away. So they can't really get there and back. And there's like signs on the doors, if you're late from lunch, you're getting cut or you're not going to continue the rest of the day. So they kind of have to go to the machines to eat out of them a lot of times. So that's why we provide fresh food options. So like sandwiches, pizzas, hot pockets, uncrustables, noodles, different things like that. So they're good locations for vending, and I think that's something that makes a huge difference because like then these places are ones we have to go back to pretty often. You know, we may go 3 to 4 days a week to some of these locations to restock them because they'll run through those things pretty quickly. Monster energies and stuff like that are getting drank very rapidly. Um, and it, I think that's one of the main differences is like looking for somewhere where people really it's less of a luxury. It's more of like a necessity that people are, using these machines.
No, that's super interesting. You spoke about sort of building that relationship. What is the relationship with the actual, let's say, manufacturing facility? Who's the decision maker there? Like, are you guys profit sharing? Like, what's the business model there?
Yeah, good question. So right now we don't have any, and we never have had any profit sharing. Like we really brand it as an amenity to the
Mm.
workers, keeping them on premise longer, which everyone likes, and keeping them, well fed and hydrated. So it's always branded as an amenity, and we don't have any of like the revenue or profit sharing, which can definitely take a hit to your margins if you structure it that way. And I know some people will because it can be a little harder to get into places. And the relationship is usually held with kind of the manager, the floor level manager at that facility. Um, and that is a key point or a key part of it too, because like, one of our main locations, the second there moved to a new location and they're like, "Hey, we don't like the vending here. Like, will you guys come help us out?"
Mm.
So that sort of thing. We didn't end up actually taking that account because we're very we have very dense geographic area right now, and it was like another 20 minutes outside of it, and I kind of like keeping everything. You can get to almost every location within 5 minutes of another.
Oh
um,
wow.
so it just really limits windshield time and things like that and just keeps it small and efficient and ideally less work for everyone involved. But those relationships can be sticky, and it's kind of with those managers there, and it's definitely harder to manage that when you're kind of doing it more as like a passive or absentee style business because I'm not going in and maintaining those relationships as much, and that's why it's really key that we have a really good person operating the business and going in there and like that's personable, likes to talk and chat with them and make sure everything's okay. One other thing that we added that I think helped is we could brand it as like tech enabled vending or something. That's how I would brand it now if I was selling the business. But just putting QR codes on those machines because a lot of machines, if you go there, and naturally there's going to be sometimes a item that doesn't vend or something like they're just kind of fickle. They might be getting 100 vends a day. Sometimes just one doesn't go through for whatever reason. And so we have a QR code that they can scan and it'll send us like then they fill out a little form of like whatever the issue is that they're experiencing and it'll send it to us. And then there's another QR code that will they can put in products they want to see in that machine. So it's like basically just a Google form, and then they can say, "Hey, we want Skittles in this machine," and then so we can kind of aggregate things that way. Um,
And are
which I
people
think
pretty opinionated? Since I mean, this is what they're relying on for their lunches and snacks. So I'm sure they get more opinionated. It's like the little pleasures in life.
Oh yeah, people are definitely opinionated. Like if your drinks aren't coming out that cold or anything like that. Like I will say the seller, he was really good about keeping all the customers happy. So like one of the things he does is when you go to the machine, he likes to take out and taught, this to myself and our employees, like take the first drink out because the drinks you're putting in aren't cold. And so when someone comes to buy a drink, if it's not that first drink that's cold, so he takes that one out, then loads it back up, then puts that one back in. So just like small things like that.
No, that's super smart. And were you focused at all on adding new accounts after you acquired the business, or just kind of keeping things running and cash flowing? And was the business pretty stable after you bought it, in terms of maintaining these accounts and just kind of like a cash cow that, was low growth, or how have you thought about that?
Yeah. So initially we had some immediate growth just in changes in pricing. So for instance, some things were selling for like $1.70, which then I noticed all of our nickels would run out in the machines. And so it's like just change everything to an even $1.75 or things like that. So there was some growth just from immediate changes in pricing. And
How
we
did
were
that
not,
how did that change your gross margin out of curiosity?
I think initially just from some of the changes that we had, we ended up getting a bump of about 5 to 6%. So
Wow.
not bad,
Yeah,
actually.
low
And
hanging
and
fruit.
exactly, exactly, and I think that's how probably a lot of vending machine businesses are out there because there's a lot of just, like, mom and pop vending machine businesses out there that are, uh, ran very casually, and we definitely run it kind of more casually, but started with that eye for, like, detail and checking on things like that, which just fresh eyes can be helpful when coming into any kind of business looking for the low-hanging fruit.
And what have you sort of focused on? Did you try to add new accounts, or are you kind of like, I'm gonna keep this in this dense geo area and just let it cash flow?
Yeah, so initially, I did not wanna add any new accounts. I was like, "We're kind of running at pretty full capacity for like our employee and like the truck and storage area. But like anything, there's naturally some churn. So that happened. Our first account churned, after we'd had the business probably about like 7 or 8 months, which was a little bit of a wake up call. Like, hey, if we're not adding new accounts, like this will just slowly decay over
Yeah.
time, inevitably. And basically, what had happened, it was just an account that had an owner that owned like 4 different warehouses. We were in one of them, and they wanted to put, yeah, micro markets into all of them. So micro markets is like the self-checkout
Mm.
kiosks that you'll see in like airports and places like that. Um, and so we didn't have a very close relationship there. So they didn't even tell us until like the contract was signed. Because eventually, I got a call, hey, we're looking to could you guys have the machines out on like this date? And I was like, oh, what's wrong? And that's when I realized I was like, okay, I'm probably a little too unplugged. And they said nothing, luckily nothing was wrong. And they're like, it's actually, above my head. Our owner just wants us to all have micro markets in these locations for the as like a benefit for the employees. But most of the employees actually ended up not liking it because they look more premium and they just kind of charge more. And they charge more
Mhm.
too because they build in a little bit for theft, I guess, in those
Oh,
prices.
interesting.
Because inevitably, like sometimes
Yeah,
people will just take things. Um,
that's so interesting. And
and
what did you, and I'm curious, what is churn like? Like what is the, I guess, lifetime value of each of these accounts usually?
so most of the other ones, I mean, have been around with the previous owner and now us for like over 8 years.
Wow.
And so pretty long. And like most of the time, it's a pain to switch. So there's definitely some sticking costs. Like they have to orchestrate coming and telling us to get the machines out, the new people getting in there, um, which is just a little bit of a hassle. Like to get the machines out, we had to take the doors off of the
Oh
of
no.
like the building, which was my first experience, and it was good to. I was there for all that, and we had to like measure everything, remove the door to the break room, and go through all this. So it's definitely a hassle for everyone involved. So usually they're not like quick to switch or anything. Um, but it did make us realize like there's inevitably going to be some churn here. So it's hard to really pinpoint a LTV for them just because like we have such a small sample size, I
Right.
suppose. And most of them have stuck around besides that one. And I think as long as you're servicing them pretty well, like you're servicing them well, and like if there's something broken, we're going to send a mechanic out there, as soon as we can to get it fixed. And we're very responsive on issues and things like that. So I think that really minimizes the likelihood of churn.
So
Let's,
what does your team look like there? You have the guy going, the operator who's going around making sure everything's well stocked. You also have like a mechanic on call, or is it the same person? Like who's on the team?
yeah. So that's basically it. Is the mechanic is he's a freelance mechanic who works with like us and probably 8 or 10 other vendors. So he's great to have because like I don't have to pay him unless he's doing something for us.
Right.
Um, and so that could, that's pretty ideal. So it's really just like pretty much a ton of key man risk on our employee who's there handling just about everything. And that's kind of how we branded the role. It's just like basically running the business. And I think, she could maybe be a good candidate to buy it down the line if she wanted to do some kind of seller financing and own a business herself. Like that's kind of how I'm thinking about it, because she's done a great job with it, and I know eventually you know was looking at this kind of as like an intro and a trial run into business ownership, but not in any rush to sell it either, because it is good just to have something there cash flowing.
And tell us about, we didn't talk about this, but how are you compensating this operator? Because really she's like the I guess almost like the day-to-day, point person. She's like the person, right? So
Yeah.
how are you incentivizing her to stay?
Yeah, so this is another place that we kind of went wrong. um we have her basically just as an hourly rate, and then we'll give out some kind of just discretionary bonuses for like mile markers, as far as like, hey, you've been here X amount of time, or great job so far, or we got a new account. So we have gotten some new accounts. I kind of glossed over that. Once we lost that one, I was like, all right, we need to have some new account outreach and things. um so stuff like that we can compensate her on, but right now it's just hourly. But if I was starting things again, I would definitely have it as a base kind of salary plus a percentage of either a profit or revenue split. And that's how a lot of the bigger vending companies will do it. She had actually previously worked at Five Star Vending, which is I think the biggest vending in kind of the southeast, and that's a lot of times how they'll do it. We I was just having kind of trouble initially, and I had thought about that a little bit, but I was like trying to figure out what it would take to keep her happy too, because I was like, I don't want, if things go south, to then her not be making enough money and look for something else. And alternatively, like we were talking to an account recently that would be a really big account, and we've been in discussions with them for a little while, and I was like, well, man, if we get this account, she's going to be making like way over market too. like depending on how
Yeah.
we structure it. So it is a little bit tricky, but I think the best way to do it is a, base salary, either that be by week or days that they're servicing the machines, plus a percentage of the profit. And a lot of times the way that it'll work now is like it could be, say, your business makes on average like 5,000 in profit a week or something. You could say, within the 5,000, you get 5% of that. And then anything over the 5,000, you get, 8% or some kind of tiers system to it.
Interesting. Interesting. And you said she came from a vending background. Was that what you were looking for when you were hiring? Like this, the first time obviously was a friend or a friend's friend, but this time around, what were you looking for? You got 100 applications. How did you kind of screen and, vet for this operator?
Yeah, I did get 100 applications, but I will say they were of largely varying quality. Like I remember one of the first applications we got, I think it literally said, "I have driving license and clean record," and that was like their whole application. I was like, "Well, that is really what we are looking for." But I was like, "Okay, that can work." I was like, "Well, I'll be interested to see what we get here." But then we were fortunate enough just that she did have vending background, which was a huge plus overall. But at the same time, I mean, if someone didn't, you can train them, I think, relatively quickly. A lot of it's more about if they're personable and responsible. So people who are going to always show up on time, like we're not having to track her down or anything like that. Because, I mean, this is kind of like a blue collar job still. So it's, you want people who are just really reliable and honest because you've got cash as well. It's like a business you're dealing with a decent amount of cash, not nearly
Mm.
as much as it was. I would worry about that with ATM businesses. I know you had an interview with one guy who had a lot of ATM routes, but I think they have so much cash that they're
So
entrusting with
much.
people.
No, absolutely. And I think that's why they have those like armored vehicles that go and like, take cash out, but or fill them up. But that makes a lot of sense. How much of your business is cash versus people switching to cards and Apple Pay and things like that?
Yeah, so it's been steadily declining. I think when we bought it, it was probably 80% card and 20% cash, and now it might even be 85-15. And a lot of it is, Apple Pay and tap to pay. So I think if you have machines that can handle that, like you'll be a lot better off. But the good thing about cash is you don't have to pay that 6% fee.
Hmm. Interesting. And tell us about the new account outreach. You realize you lost this first customer and you're like, oh, wow, we need to bring on more. Were you the one actually outreaching? Was this operator doing the work? What did that look like? What worked and what didn't work?
So we got a little bit lucky. A lot of things I think in this world have been just fortuitous for us. Someone had written a good review for us on a women's Facebook group, apparently. And that's how this new account had found us. They're like, "Oh, we found you on Facebook." I was like, "We don't have a Facebook page that I know of or anything." So someone, I guess, had said like, "Hey, we need new vending," and someone else had recommended us and sent across kind of like actually my contact info. They had my cell phone, so I just got a call with it. And then other account outreach that we're doing now, and to set up another one was like through personal network. I knew some operations managers and things from distribution companies, and so reaching out to key people like that in businesses. So like one new account we're looking at is a liquor distributor, and they have a corporate office connected to like a at least probably 10,000 square foot warehouse. So they've got like 10 machines in there and 7 coffee machines. So like that's a great account right there. That'll probably, each machine you expect to do about, ideally a good machine will do about 1,000 a month or so. So if you can get a 10 machines or something, you could say hopefully, $120,000 on top line there from getting like a new account. That's kind of how you would quantify it or think about it if it's a good location and account. So far we've been using personal network and things, but I just recently, and I haven't even published it yet, but put in a website or put together a website, and because I had seen a vending company for sale, and it was they had a website, and it was a guy, and this is just because I still always check biz buy sell,
Yeah.
and am always looking at businesses, and I don't really intend to expand this one, but I'm still curious about their multiples, and I think there has been a little bit of multiple expansion in just vending since they've gotten more popular on like Instagram and stuff like that. But I digress. So the website was actually driving a lot of new traffic to him. He's like, we're not looking to add in new accounts or anything like that because I wanted to grow it, but we have a website and we get hit up pretty frequently, just like for vending services through their own SEO and things like that. So I'm thinking about setting something like that up just to grow organically, really. And I think that if that has any sort of good traction at all, then it should be more than enough to make up for churn since the
And you,
churn's pretty low.
yeah, and you spoke about, sort of some of these locations that, have multiple machines. What is the in your average location you're in, how many machines do you are put in or are you servicing?
Yeah, so we are putting a good bit in because we're trying to get like big accounts for the most part, and not like we have only one location that has a one-off machine, and I think that that was just there because um, it's a location that's expected to grow as far as like the volume and things they're doing. But we have others where it's 5 to 7 or
Wow.
so, and it might be some in like the break room, some in the warehouse, some kind of around. And I think that's big too, just again, like any other business, kind of limiting your windshield time, and you know getting in there and making it worth your while, really.
That's super interesting. And tell us about how you would rank the various types of customers for a vending machine business. Because I wouldn't have expected. It makes sense how you talk about it, right? These warehouses, these distribution centers, manufacturing facilities. How would you rank like the types of customers if you were looking at buying a vending machine business now? What would
Yeah,
you be looking for?
good question. And I hadn't given it a ton of thought, but I should have, because I'm going to keep my customers happy and say they're number one, the manufacturing and warehouse distributing. But I will say the downside with them is they're more price sensitive. Um, Whereas I think some places that I've heard are pretty good is like hospitals are supposed to be pretty good too,
Mm,
because they have a good bit of traffic and they're less price sensitive. Some people really like schools, but the biggest thing for me is I want something with in a secured location, just because
mm.
dealing with like vandalism or theft, like repair, these machines are pretty expensive. Um, so if you had to deal with people like breaking into them or breaking your glass out in like a public area, I just wouldn't really want to deal with that. And the maintenance is going to be way worse if they're exposed to the elements. So I would probably put, I really like the manufacturing and warehouse because also they seem to be a little bit less health conscious almost, and not like, whereas in a corporate office, some people are not wanting to eat vending machine food.
Yes.
At least that's how it seems. So like, but if you can get a micro market in a corporate environment, those are pretty good. And we would like to get, one of those. I talked to a vendor who had one in a large building in Atlanta, and they were making, I think, over like 10 grand a month from one micro market in an office building. So
And
like,
what a micro market being there's no vending component. You're just kind of stocking maybe like a little wall full of various items, and then it's kind of like an honesty policy type of situation.
yeah, exactly. So they've got their shelving set up, and then they also have like a little refrigerator next to it and things like that, and then they just go through and scan it. Now there's new things coming out where people have like their AI powered vending and smart machines, and I've gotten calls about those before too, where you just scan your card and then you open the door and you pick out anything you want from it, and then it charges you. So it kind of eliminates the theft component, but it doesn't have like all of the vending components, like the spirals that push out snacks and things like
Yeah.
that. I haven't fully made up my mind on those, but I do think they're just like a little too expensive, probably. Whereas a micro market you can set up for a few $1,000s. Um, you can get the kiosk, which I would get it through Nyax just because then it would integrate with all of my other machines. And that's probably around 3,000. I forget exactly what it is. And then it's just shelving and, a couple of those coolers, which can be 1,000 or so, um, which is cheaper even than putting in like actual vending machines.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. Um, I'm curious, you're talking about these different expansion opportunities, but you also mentioned not really wanting to expand more. What is your sort of thought process there? Um, any sort of like limiting factors here, the warehousing, that one operator, how are you thinking about expansion? Is this something you want to keep growing, or are you happy just kind of getting the cash flow you're getting from the locations you're in?
Yeah, that's a good question. Something I've kind of wrestled with. Right now, where I'm at is at this point in time, I feel pretty happy with it. And I'm like, I don't know if we want to, because basically we'd have to upgrade storage space, get another, box truck and another operator. So things kind of grow in stages. Right now we have limited maintenance capex and things, and it would be a concentrated push because, if we add one large account, we're probably in good shape still with our current, footprint. But two or three, then it's like, all right, you have to hire new people, get a new truck, upgrade your space, and then you're tacking on so much more expense with it too. It's like then you almost need five new accounts.
Right.
Like it's kind of thinking through things like that. And since it has been relatively low personal time commitment, I'm interested in just kind of keeping it as is, and then have been looking at other business acquisition opportunities and things, and I guess wanting to diversify a little bit. But I don't think, if someone wants to get in and grow the business, um, I think it is a space where you definitely can. If you go out there and you're, you know, knocking on doors and not afraid to sell and you set up a website, I do think there is the ability to really grow, into a sizable business and then possibly have a good exit. I mean, it seems like there's more institutional capital interested in the space but you have to get past a certain threshold to get there, and then you'll have some multiple expansion and things when you actually sell the business. So I don't think it's a bad business for people to buy small and really scale, but you will have to put a lot of money back into the business to achieve that scale. And the machines aren't cheap. Moving them is brutal. Guess how much one weighs?
Oh, I don't, 5,000 tons. I don't know. I just made that up.
Yeah, 5,000 tons. Okay, now it's gonna sound light. They're like 850 pounds or something, but
Okay, that's a
still,
lot.
it's still super hard to like move around and things like that. So like the this capex and like the push to grow it can be a little bit hard. And it's something you have to do in stages, you know?
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like, jumping from where you're currently at to having to new facility, new operator, like it's just a lot, and you have to be willing to now add all of these additional accounts and really pursue that growth.
Yeah.
Especially because now you're not, I mean, let's talk about what does your day-to-day look like now?
Yeah, well, now as an M&A advisor with you guys, I get to hop on and do a lot of meeting with a lot of the different members and going through deals and reviewing deals. So that's been a ton of fun. And then my day to day really on the vending side of things is like I'll check check my app and make sure everything's looking smooth and going well and there's no machines down. If something's down and um our operator hasn't like noticed or anything yet, I'll shoot a text in our group chat and see how things are going. And then um Fridays I'll order inventory based on like kind of the sheet of things that she sent over. Hey, it looks like we're running low. We basically have like a spreadsheet and it says what our inventory count should be. So, like I had mentioned, like the X amount of boxes of honey buns. Okay, we're low by this many and all that. So then I'll go through and order things. So it's
What do you
pretty chill for the most part.
what do you think your weekly time commitment's like right now? Is it the passive income sort of that you were looking for in the very beginning before even, I guess, going down this business buying path when you were looking at the Amazon automation stores and, being an options trader? Is this kind of what you were hoping for?
Good question too. So some weeks, yes. This week, no. Um, I think that's kind of how it goes. I mean, this week we just had an issue with our truck where like one of the bearings or something blew. And so like that's going to be a costly expense to like redo that part. We had a machine in a specific location that we had sent, three different people out to look at, and people couldn't figure out what was wrong. We just found out yesterday that the facility it was in, there were mice and it had chewed up all the wiring in the machine. And so like it had chewed off the covers on the wires. So they were like touching and like five things were vending at the same time because it was getting it all confused. Um, and so, there's weeks where it's stuff like this and it is more of a time commitment because I'm like, okay, I also am ordering these parts and orchestrating the people to go out there and fix things. And it was probably a net loss this week between those sort of, different aspects. So like nothing, it's not truly passive. And I think if I bought a larger business, like one of more substance, it might be almost easier to remove yourself too because you can have mechanics and things like that. I mean, you've got a ton of businesses and you've done them at scale. So like I think sometimes it is easier if you get one at scale to actually fully pull yourself out of operations just because every additional cost layer is eating into our margins way more than if the business is bigger as a percentage. Like if you tack in someone who costs $50,000, like it's going to make a huge dent to us, whereas it might not make a big dent to a bigger company. So I
Yeah.
go back and forth. But this week, not worth it. Last week was great, and I probably did like an hour. Um, so not a direct answer there. But if I was, back in the position and deciding whether to buy it or not again, I definitely would buy it.
No, I mean I think that's the best thing one could hope for going down this path is, would you do it again? And the answer being yes. So no, I'm glad to hear that. Any sort of final words of wisdom? I want to be sensitive of your time. I know you have another call, but any sort of final words of wisdom to the first time buyers out there, or maybe where you were at a couple years back?
Yeah, that's something I've kind of wrestled with too, because I know a lot of people will talk about it, and we kind of advise generally to buy a bigger business, and this would definitely have fallen under smaller since the owner dependency was huge and the key man risk is huge and a lot of those red flags that naturally everyone would kind of call out. But at the same time, I think that doing a smaller acquisition first for me, acted a little bit as a proof of concept, and I've gone through it before, and now I'm feeling much more comfortable when I'm looking at other businesses to kind of take that next leap and buy a bigger business where you're maybe putting a huge personal guarantee on something because and I've kind of built a little bit of the confidence of like I know I can figure out most of the things that'll come up because like I would have never thought I'd deal with some of the issues that I have like the one I was just telling you about with the mouse eating wires. And so just kind of building up the confidence to take that further leap. And it kind of depends what you're looking for too. Like if you're going to go all in, maybe it is definitely worth getting the larger business. But I definitely wouldn't blanketly advise people not to go small necessarily in the first one. I don't know what your thoughts are on that because I know we do tell people, don't buy a
Yeah.
job.
I think it's a very personal decision, right? Like, are you trying to replace your income? Do you want this to be more, eventually, maybe more passive? Obviously, I think it's unrealistic right away. Um, I mean, it's such a personal decision. I always think bigger is probably less risky. Obviously, it depends on the specific business, but I think
Hmm.
there's validity to what you're saying, absolutely. And it probably depends on the type of business and how sticky the customers were, right? Like, as if you're telling me it
Yeah.
was smaller business, but maybe super high churn, then that's a lot of work versus you're just maintaining your customers, been around for 8 years mostly, like very different situation. So
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, don't necessarily go out and buy any small business. Make sure that there's some staying power there for sure. And, as you mentioned too, like it's not necessarily a sales engine and you don't have to be out selling constantly, which makes it definitely better if you can keep up your customer service and things. And I think there's a good path to build a nice business here. But if you're not involved in it too, one thing to mention is it definitely deteriorates margins some because the old owner was going out and fixing things in the way where we're operating it, like we're sending a mechanic, which is just way more expensive for things like that.
Yeah, no, definitely important to think through those replacement costs. And Walker, really, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to reach out, by the way, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, good question. So I actually haven't updated my LinkedIn in quite a while, so I need to probably go in there and do that. I think it still says I was working at my previous company, but I don't have like Twitter, and I think my Instagram's private. So LinkedIn's probably the best way, or they can also email me now at Walker at smbdealhunter.xyz. Now that
Awesome.
I'm involved on with you guys.
Awesome. Well, Walker, thank you again. This is awesome. Really great, diving deep into your story. Super excited, obviously, to have you on our M&A advisory team. And yeah, excited to continue following along.
Yeah, appreciate it, Helen. Super great talking through everything and, looking forward to continue helping other people look at businesses and then hopefully get another one myself.
Absolutely.